BioWare's Anthem. Let's get the lay of the land. So, Suriel, you went to BioWare?
To EA Redwood Shores.
Okay, and you got to play how much? What was the experience like?
It was an all-day thing, more or less, basically. But it was broken up into 3 separate demos. One was sort of the beginning of the game, sort of a couple missions we can't really talk about because they're like the intro, and then a couple of the early missions, which I think some people played in the alpha. That was a while ago. And then we had basically what was the demo, the VIP demo that was out last week.
That Jojoba you played a lot of.
Yep.
Great. Yeah. Okay.
And then the last part was the end game. Well, what they told us was here is an end game session with a fully leveled character across stuff, like basically running the end game loops, or at least what they told us are the end game loops.
That's very interesting.
Launch.
If you had to quantify it, like how many hours did you spend playing Anthem?
I'd say like 5 or 6.
And if you had to quantify it, scale of 1 to 10 on the Game Informer review scale. No, just joking.
Nope.
What was your takeaway though, Suriel? Just high level impression walking out of that studio.
I think I have a pretty good idea of what Anthem is going to be now.
Okay.
Across sort of like all the 3 of those demos, I think it is, on a basic level, it is that Destiny kind of like shooter.
It is. So I feel like they were messaging a fair amount like, it's not Destiny. Don't think of it exactly like Destiny. Maybe in our rapid fire when we were on the cover story trip.
I mean, one of the questions we asked was, is this a Destiny?
I think that was the first question. And Mark Dara, executive producer, his answer was no.
Well, it's not like they're going to say, oh yeah, we're just totally ripping them off.
I know, but you can say it's a living game or something.
Right. It is a living game is sort of what I feel like it is.
I feel like we kind of knew that going in. Was there a takeaway you didn't expect?
It's hard to know because I think some of the biggest questions that I still have about Anthem I think are on the late game, but I think it sort of fleshed out a lot of sort of vague impressions I think I had about the game.
Okay.
So I think the thing I came away with most is that I think classes are what is going to make this game.
Okay.
Versus sort of some of the individual activities. Like in Destiny, the classes are different, but besides sort of their jump, they don't feel fundamentally different. They have different abilities and supers, but the base is sort of the shooting action. Whereas in Anthem, it's way more about how your class is playing a role.
And the cool thing, as they explained at the cover story trip, was that idea that the classes are just the suits, and so you can swap out 2 different ones as well. Right. It's not like you're locked in for like, all right, I'm a warlock and no way out of it.
Right. Unlike in something like Destiny where you have to,
log out of the game, log back in as another character.
Yeah.
Right.
And you have
start
to
a new character.
Yeah, level those characters up individually versus like, hey, I'm gonna hop in the storm suit and give that a shot.
It's somewhat like the class swapping is somewhat similar to Destiny's in that weapons sort of you can swap between characters, and that's sort of what your gear score is effectively what determines how powerful you are. So it's a lot easier to swap. Sort of, I talked to Mike Dara while I was there. Mark Dara, sorry, and Mike Gamble. So kind of.
Did they fuse?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't know. Congratulations.
in Mike Dara, yeah. Okay. They did the fusion stance right in front of us. It was weird. So the biggest takeaway was that the classes are going to have a lot of variety even within those same classes. So with the fully leveled character, you have a lot of different abilities and sort of components to choose. That's sort of like this static modifier that you can choose from. And those are, I think, the thing that's going to be most customizable.
So what it seemed like from the footage you brought back, we did an episode of New Gameplay today,
right.
That you chose the Interceptor.
In the early, so I try to spread out across the classes. I chose the Interceptor early on, and then for the VIP demo segment, I played as the Colossus, and then for the endgame, I played as the Storm.
Interesting.
Which kind of gave me a good idea of what everything is.
Yeah, for sure. What'd you play as in the demo, Joe?
Well, so everyone starts out as a ranger in the demo.
Oh, okay.
And then once you get to level 12, you get a token to unlock 1 more. And then, because they were hitting technical problems, they gave everyone tokens to unlock the other ones. So you were only supposed to get Ranger and 1 other one.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the demo, basically everyone could just try all 4. I played mostly Storm, to answer your question.
They seem the coolest. It's the most mystical, floaty one going out there.
I think there's going to be a Storm problem once we get into the full game where everyone's going to be playing Storm, because I feel like it's the most fun class.
I think, at least in my experience, conceptually the problem, like, it's not just that it's cool conceptually, which it is, but also mechanically, as they described it to us previously, it's like, oh, it's kind of the glass cannon.
Yeah.
Except it's not glass at all. It's the super-powered cannon that's also, like, at least in my experience.
I don't know if
like,
you want to play the steel cannon, I guess.
Yeah, no. So it's like I was playing the Ranger and having a good time with it, and then I started using the Storm, and I was just like destroying stuff in a way that I was like, why would anyone want to be the Ranger when this is available? You know?
Yeah.
So
It's also the flashiest one. Like it's super. The ultimate ability is just this wave of like elemental explosions one after the other that you always just no matter what you're pressing, you always just see combo come up on the screen no matter
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah.
doing, and it's just this really impressive like light show basically. That
There is a
happens.
lot going on in that combat.
and you get
Yeah.
extended hovering time as a storm too.
Right,
Which
and your
is-
shield is stronger when you're hovering.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
which basically means like you're never hitting the floor as a storm. You're always basically flying around. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But
Did you leave the demo thinking like having more fun than you expected, Joe?
Well, so yes.
Okay.
Gameplay wise, yes. It's weird though because when you're talking about a live service, whether it's Anthem or Destiny or whatever, like it's really hard to separate your experience from a like gameplay and technical perspective. And there were a lot of like big technical issues with that demo over the weekend.
Outside of the launch, because it got off to a super rickety launch.
It got off to a rocky start. Like hardly anyone was able to play any substantial amount on that first day.
Right. You
And
seem
then-
very into Mark Dara tweeting, the executive tweeting a picture of a guy just banging his head on a desk.
Well,
It's nice.
and of course, like I can, like understand on their part, they've been working on this game for years. It's finally sort of like the widest release that it's seen yet.
Right.
And then it's just sort of like the train grinding to a halt as, like,
It's also just that it builds into that larger storyline of, all right, this is a tough genre. Are you sure you want to do this, BioWare? Can you actually do this? And then the first, like, ta-da, they have is a faceplant. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, all right.
Yeah. But like, so it's hard to separate that kind of stuff from it because even after that first day, there's this bug that was persisting throughout my whole weekend playing of like basically an infinite loading screen. Like it hits about 95% loaded and then just stops. So then you have to like close the app, reopen the app, resume where you were, go through another load screen, but this time usually it works. So there's a lot of like closing and restarting that was involved. So that made it hard to like get a good sense of the flow, right? Of like, gonna do a mission, gonna, group up with friends, gonna go back to the base, gonna go back out again. Because like I was restarting every 20 minutes maybe or so.
Well, the good news with all these tech issues is that the game doesn't come out until 3 weeks from now. Like this
if it's
coming
any
in hot.
consolation, we also had some technical issues during the ears demo. Let's say
The which demo?
EA Redwood Shorts.
Oh, okay. I am very curious to see what this thing is like at launch. And I feel like the internet, as more and more people gain access to this demo, like that outcry is already building. Like recently this week, it was like, there was a screenshot that was leaked essentially with some pricing that might not be final, but people were like, what?
It is absolutely not final. Like Casey Hudson had like addressed some of this in a tweet earlier today, I think.
Okay, but it was $20 for a scan, and they're like, what the hell? But that's nice they addressed it in some way.
Yeah, I mean, he said something about like that is not a final economy going on.
The combo of BioWare fan base, BioWare criticism combined with living game criticism, like the level that community has to sustain, like this could be a perfect storm.
Yeah. Well, and there's I think also a question out there that like, I was tweeting some about Anthem, the last week or so, and like a question that I've seen a couple times is people being like, "Well, hey, maybe this isn't maybe you can't play this single player like they said you could."
By the way, this sounds like a very intelligent person asking this question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's just like part of it is like I feel like the communication on their part has been, this is built as a multiplayer game, designed as a multiplayer game, meant to be enjoyed as a multiplayer game.
Yeah.
If you really want to, you can like shoehorn
Right,
a single player experience out of the main story. But we wouldn't recommend that. It's sort of like the messaging that I've gotten on that, right?
Yeah, it's a little Monster Hunter-y.
Yeah. But it seems like some people have interpreted that as BioWare coming out and being like, hey, if you love single player, this is a single player game. But if you love friends, it's like, no,
Don't do it.
I wouldn't. So like I tried that as someone who is generally a single player gamer. Like I tried doing that over the VIP weekend and was like, all right, I'm going to just try this mission solo. And it was not going well for me.
Just impossible.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would be possible, but I was still learning the game at that point too.
Doable,
so
but not
like,
fun. I think is.
Yeah, I think doable but not fun is a good way to describe it. So then, going against basically every instinct I have, I just went into like, let's just do random matchmaking.
Oh my God.
Like
did your skin invert itself?
whoever's out there, let's do a mission. And I did several like I played for several hours like that, just with people I don't know.
We're talking to him?
No,
Okay.
but you don't really need to though either.
Yeah,
Like that's the
nothing
thing.
in Anthem that I've played felt like you need any like high degree of coordination.
That seems like a bad sign to me. Don't you want that level? Isn't the game going to shine for like, all right, I'm going to use this special at this point. You will go over there.
I think when you're talking, I guess Suriel, you can prove me wrong, but like when you're dealing with the higher level like strongholds, like the things that are really geared more sort of like Destiny strikes, you might need to do that. But
Okay.
I wasn't doing much of that stuff. So
I think
just
it scales
Yeah.
pretty. Like they talked about how they're going to have multiple difficulties. Like that he mentioned that or Mike Gamble mentioned that the highest difficulty is Grandmaster 3, which is like incredibly impossible. And I think once you have those difficulties, I think that's when you're going to want to coordinate.
Yeah.
But like even playing at the demo, and then playing the VIP demo, when I was playing with a group of friends, we were mostly just shooting the shit. Like we weren't like coordinating, and we were having fun. Like it felt like a lighter, more casual version of sort of the living shooter. And that I'm not sure if there will be raids. They haven't talked about anything like that, but it definitely feels like they are keeping it sort of like not super easy, but like your friends are there to sort of facilitate as extra damage, more so than like, okay, you need to grab this ball and I need to grab this ball and then we need to throw them at the same time. 3, 2, 1, go. And
Right.
There's not. There wasn't anything like that highly coordinated.
Right. And so you mentioned, I always thought that the strongholds were going to be the equivalent of raids if you just want to stay in Destiny world, but it is more strikes?
It is more like strikes in that
Okay.
here's just a series of tougher encounters that where the enemies, like they have elite bars and they have skulls that to indicate like, hey, take this enemy seriously.
Yeah.
And some of the bosses have like some different mechanics. Like the one I played, in that demo, I played a mission called the Temple of Scar, which is basically it was the most fun I've had playing Anthem. In that I had a fully leveled character, which meant I was practicing different builds, sort of getting a lot. By then I knew the game well enough to where I was practicing how to deal with enemies. The arenas were a lot larger, and so I was using for the most part in the demo, it felt like flying was how you got from point A to point B.
Yeah.
You weren't using it a lot mid-combat. But here, there were arenas that were large enough and sort of intricate enough that you had to use flight to maneuver to turrets that were super high above you.
And I take it flying's still the star of the show, right?
so fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really well done. It's a little finicky on PC, I think, but it takes some getting used to. But then the boss also had you couldn't just hey, it's the boss, shoot it a whole bunch and it'll die. You had to sort of disable these different shields that were basically making it invulnerable. And even that, it wasn't a high level of intricacy, but it was enough to where it was more engaging than just a bullet sponge.
Yeah. Did either of you guys get a sense of progression? Do you feel like it's going to be a long road?
So you can level from 10 to 15 in the demo.
Okay. And have they set a max level?
30 is the cap. And then you can get
Ooh.
gear. The gear that I was getting in the Endgame session was 36. But you can still equip it, and it's just, I think it's supposed to be a signifier of how much stronger it is than your current level.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know how final that is even.
Yeah.
But
those are all a lot of numbers and tuning that'll probably change.
Happen
But,
on Wednesday.
speaking of progress, the thing that I'm most curious about, I guess, quickly to answer your question, gear level progression.
And just RPG wise, is it satisfying? I guess is the core of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was excited when I got a new kind of weapon or a new kind of component that I could install that let me shoot fireballs instead of icicles and things like that.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is rewarding. I was excited to go out there and try out new grenades, new guns, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the question that I have for Suriel is, did you in any of your time get a sense of story progression at all? Because how that main story unfolds, how Fort Tarsis responds, how the characters respond to the things you do. For me, that is the big unknown that the demo doesn't touch at all.
Yeah, that I don't think was clear from the demo. I think because these sessions were all disjointed, it was hard to get a sense of what is different in Tarsis now. How have I shaped that location over the course of a game?
So just to be clear, Tarsis is the main city in the game,
Right, the
and that's
hub.
where you get all your missions. And in theory, most of the story stuff will happen. Then you go out on these missions, go back, and then your Tarsis is only single player, and it'll kind of change a little bit.
Yeah, though they've also in the last couple of weeks talked about, and maybe this is even going to be live for the demo this weekend. I think it is. Don't hold me to that. But that they've added a sort of social space which they didn't have before.
Yeah, they had a hub. You can mess around in that hub in the demo that I played, but it's more. This is more like Destiny's Tower than Tarsis is, because Tarsis is a completely isolated instance where you're sort of just going around and getting story bits and contracts and things like
Right.
that. Whereas this is like, hey, we're waiting for one person to ready up, so we're just gonna mess around in this area.
And it's also in Tarsus?
It's like a part of it, but sort of separate.
It's like an interstitial space, like a
Right.
loading bay, I think they're calling it. So it's
okay.
like when we went to go see the game, Ben, it was like you're single player in Fort Tarsus, and out. Then the only other step is you're out in the world with other people.
Yeah.
And this is a sort of intermediary step where you're not out in the world doing missions and stuff, but you can still it's a social hub. You can still
Right.
interact with other players.
And the idea being that it's easier to go from like, hey, we got back from a mission to another mission in that hub space versus Tarsus where you land from a mission, do a bunch of story stuff, and then head out on the next one. This is if you want sort of a faster, like, okay, we're in a group, we want to get a couple missions done, let's just bang them out really quick.
Yeah.
Like that is sort of the point of that hub space.
Okay, interesting. And so there was no real setup, and then the story was
Right.
basically just conversations, like codex, essentially?
The early missions had a lot more story that sort of fleshed out, like, hey, here's why, here's sort of your motivation as the freelancer. You went through the tutorial stuff. You saw more cutscenes that showed you some of the backstory of Fort Tarsus, and sort of there was this flashback cutscene that sort of detailed, like, here's how this particular fortress fell. So that was the most story that we got. But as for how sort of the progression of the story stuff goes, I didn't get like a really good sense of that.
Sure, I get it. And then in mission, though, like it was just a lot of radio chatter?
Yeah, a lot of the radio chatter. For
Okay.
Sure.
Did you have any sense? Was it annoying? Was it fine? Was it interesting?
Like again, because it felt like, well, for one, it was, you have this priority of like, okay, I'm playing with friends. This is a kind of a new environment. I need to figure out who I'm going to play with. It was like what was actually happening in the context of the story was sort of like the furthest thing from my mind, and the story didn't really it wasn't really front facing as much as you'd want it to. Like if you think about playing any individual Destiny mission out of context, it feels like there's not a lot going on. It's just
Right.
playing those in succession. That's when those threads develop. So, and because everything was so separated, I never got like a through line through any of it. So
Okay,
it was
so
hard to determine.
Here's the juicy nugget, is that Endgame stuff.
Yeah.
What are they saying about Endgame, and what did you play? What was it like?
So like I said, I played that Temple of Scar mission, which I think is like the best part of Anthem I've played so far. I've played that Tyrant Mine Stronghold, which everyone played in the demo. And then I played a Legendary Contract, which is somewhere between like a story mission and a strike. It's sort of like this, basically the thing you are repeating to get loot drops that isn't a stronghold, sort of the thing you're doing to accomplish daily challenges, monthly challenges, things like that. And those feel a little lighter. Those feel like, hey, this is the thing I'm doing today. And then like a little bit more casual fun. I think you can probably do those more easily by yourself in just regular matchmaking.
Yeah.
But other than that, it didn't feel like significantly different besides the fact that you're sort of repeating the same missions over and over. It didn't feel significantly different from what people have played of it so far, besides the fact that you are doing it in different areas. One other thing that kind of stood out to me is that, in a lot of games like this, there is this environmental diversity, and even these late game missions were still in that same sort of lush jungle biome that
Right.
we've come to associate with Anthem. Like there wasn't like, here's the desert world, or here's like this other location. And I get that, like, they don't want to have like, here's the fire level, here's the ice level, but I think like Destiny has different planets that you go to, right? And those feel distinct. Warframe has a lot of like expansive areas that you can explore, and I didn't get that sense, after playing Anthem. Like even in what they're saying is the end game stuff. Like it felt a little too similar to the early game stuff.
That's interesting. It looks gorgeous, but it's like,
Right,
are we
yeah.
going to get sick of this
A
foliage
lot of
by
really
the
cool
end?
open spaces, but it's like the just the geometry of it looks a little too similar, I think.
Totally. Did they, just messaging wise, were they trying to downplay endgame stuff, or were they saying like, oh no, like you're going to be sticking with this game for a long time?
I mean, I think they did talk about that. I have an interview up already about how sort of they plan to support it, and a lot of that is contingent on what the community sort of sticks to. So if they say, hey, we want more story stuff, they'll orient themselves towards adding additional story beats over the course of the game's life. If they like a lot of the strikes and they like strongholds, if they are into the repeatable stuff, and they'll iterate more on that. They do have like additional event kinds of activities that are coming post launch. So like, that stuff is still a question mark, but they do plan to have sort of that long tail.
That's kind of scary that they're like, oh, we'll wait and see. It's just like that pipeline. Like, I don't know how quickly they can get stuff out.
I imagine they have stuff planned already. It's just how they'll pivot later on.
Okay.
Yeah, because like to me, I don't know. That seems smart. I mean, like you said, I'm sure that there's some work done on all these fronts. I don't think they're just like, well, let's see what happens.
Everyone
Let's
takes
chill
2
out
weeks
for
off.
a couple weeks. Yeah.
What? People beat the game? Oh,
But, like,
Christ.
I think you're begging for trouble if you have it in your head, like if you think you know what the community is going to want for a game that isn't launched yet.
I think that's right. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah.
Okay. Any other big takeaways we haven't hit?
Like as much as I like the classes and stuff, I feel like the gear is sort of the area where it falls short. I did talk to Mike about they will have like these Masterwork weapons which are supposed to be flashier. They have these visual indicators and they're supposed to be a little bit more. Their effects are a little bit more beyond stat based, but I got like one Masterwork drop and it was just a component that you hear a bunch of really high stats, and that was kind of disappointing because like this is their in-game demo. I expected to have like a weapon that was different and felt unique, but they didn't have those, and I don't know if that's just them sort of like maybe not putting together the best demo that represents the game, or if that's just that stuff isn't there. But for the most part, it feels like the guns, beyond the fact of like, hey, this one's more powerful than the one I got before. Individual like kinds of weapons don't feel super different. Like if 2 heavy pistols felt more or less the same, there wasn't like a different firing effect or cadence to them. And so the guns feel like here's what I'm doing when I don't have my cool powers available. Like when that stuff is on cooldown, I just shoot, and that's sort of like the passive how you deal damage. And a lot of it is a third-person perspective, like in Destiny, because you see the guns up close. You know, it's easier to sort of become familiar with them. Whereas here, I never felt like all the guns feel more or less interchangeable. That was sort of my takeaway from it.
Okay.
But I mean,
There are different types of guns. Like there's marksmanship rifles, which are like 3-shot bursts. There's light machine guns. But like between like even in Destiny, like even different auto rifles can feel different versus like here where they all feel more or less similar. And a lot of it is because we are getting a lot of that early game stuff. Those differences become more exaggerated like once you get into the end game. But even in the end game, they didn't feel as different as I think I was expecting them to.
I guess my question is: does the other gear that you get, those other components and stuff that you
I think
install,
those are the more crucial.
Add the variety,
right? That is how you tool like your class to have like different spell effects, different elements. The components I think can sort of orient you. Do you want to be beefier? Do you want to be sort of like faster? Do you want to have focus more on melee? I think that's going to be where the customization is, where I can tailor the effects of my class specifically, but not like I didn't get that same sense from the guns that I was using.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's maybe like set your expectations more towards the class than the guns, which is sort of where a lot of these games have sort of emphasized their differences.
Some people will be disappointed by what you said about like the end game activities feeling very similar.
Right.
I guess on some level, I kind of expected that. And not even that it's good, but it just sort of seems almost like expected. Like an end game on any like MMO or
sure.
Like there's a lot of grinding.
I think it's less about me being disappointed. I think it's like. I think if you were expecting, I'm trying to set expectations.
Yeah,
If you were expecting something like wildly different, the end game to be wildly different in terms of what you were actually doing, I think like that is maybe a little too high. I think you are running the same activities for this gear.
Yeah. So that's ultimately, I guess, what my question about it was. Is like I'm okay with a little repetition at the end game, I guess.
Yeah.
But for me, if that's not worth it, then it's a problem.
And I think
it's like what's the carrot on the stick? What's driving you to do those loops?
Right.
Did you get a good sense of that?
I think usually it would be to have like I'm trying to do this activity so I can get this really cool gun, and I like that still feels like a question mark because we didn't have those weapons available.
Okay.
So that is sort of the question mark. But if they said, here's our end game demo, right? So if this is what they're showing us, then I guess I'm a little disappointed. But
the carrot that they're showing you is these Masterwork weapons that, in your opinion, were
that's the thing. They didn't have any Masterwork weapons for us to see, and I got a Masterwork item that was just like a stat boost for.
Okay.
So that is sort of where I'm trading cautiously. And I talked to Mike. Mark. He said that those Masterwork weapons are going to like look and feel distinct. But it's hard to know for sure, right?
Yeah.
So
that
is still a little bit of a question mark. That is kind of a concern.
I know we're going to be reviewing this game soon, but after your time playing it for both of you, more optimistic or more pessimistic? Like where's like your hype level going in, and then after getting your hands on it, how did that needle trajectory change?
for me, so like when we talked about anticipated games of 2019,
It was number one,
like,
wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was number one. So for me, like I mean, it's not like sky high. I was already pretty excited about it. I would say that the needle moved in two opposite directions to end up basically where it was before. And that's
Technically down,
Technically,
gameplay up.
I was like, oh man, this could be a huge disaster if this stuff keeps going.
Yeah.
And gameplay wise, I think it was a little like it was better than I was expecting.
Joe, that was a very satisfying answer. Surreal top his answer.
I actually have a very similar answer in that like I was very surprised by like the classes. I think I did not go into thinking like they were going to be as distinct and cool to play like individually as I thought they were going to be. But you know, like with some of the gun stuff and some of the a lot of the shooting can feel like it doesn't feel super involved. So I ended up sort of about where I was before, I think, overall.
Which was
Like, I'm excited. I'm going to play this game. Like, I want to play this game with like
willing to play is the hype level.
Well, I've already convinced like 2 other people that we're going to roll as a group, basically.
Oh, great.
And so we just need a 4th on PC if anyone's available. So we are going to play this game as a group, but I think like my expectations are tempered more towards like hey, we're just going to hop on Discord and mess around with a while, and Anthem will be the thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
Versus like, all right, everyone, like it's raid night. Let's take this very seriously and like let's try
Take
to
off
get
your
through
Anthem
this.
cosplay.
Yeah,
We're
that's right.
going in, boys.
That's right.
Well, and based on Suriel, like, from what I've heard from Suriel about it too, it's like the question that is still unanswered for me, like, isn't whether I'm going to play Anthem. I'm going to play it. It's like whether I will keep playing it.
Right.
And that's the one that I want the answer to be yes. I want a game like that, but like no game has ever gotten its hooks in me like that
Stardew
before.
Valley.
Well, Stardew Valley,
understand.
yes,
It's
but
different beast. I
that's not a game as service thing.
I get it.
That's
should
just
be,
that's
but
just
I
a
get it.
long game. That's not a game with like a robust ending.
Exactly.
I get it. Great. A lot of stuff on the site, right?
Yeah. We
Interviews,
have a
stuff like that?
full preview. We have an interview with Mike Gamble, so
Sweet.
check that all out.
That was just a clip from a larger show called The Game Informer Show. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, or GameInformer.com. We take the fun opportunities and exclusive information from Game Informer magazine and boil it into a show that airs every Thursday with exclusive cover story information, developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So come love games with us.